Alright, hello everybody, welcome to the stream. So today, as you can see on the screen, we're going to be looking at some viewer game analysis. I guess we could start with the first one here that was sent in. Hi Floating Kitten. So if we just go here. Yeah, so maybe if there's time at the end of the stream or near the end of the stream, I could play viewers who want to challenge me, but I think the main focus of today's stream is to analyze any games that you guys would like me to. So we've got this first game loading up. This one was sent in by Don Rajesh, and let's just look at the report really quickly. So it looks like Don Rajesh won. So why don't we just take a look at what happened in this game. And if anyone else has a game they'd like me to analyze, feel free to send it in through the chat or just request your game if I've already added it to the library. So here we have e4, e5, knight of 3, knight c6. So this is all normal. Then we have the Italian game with bishop c4, knight f6. Another good move for black on move 3 is bishop c5, but both work here. Let's do self-analysis so we don't have these lines here. Or actually, let's just not show the lines, alright. Because I personally don't like using the engine unless it's a very calculation heavy or a very concrete position, so. Now we have d3, and then here black goes for a move that unfortunately does not really work too well here. That's because white's plan after d3 is to go c3 and d4. But basically, by going bishop d4, you're just kind of running into that idea. So here, white shouldn't have played bishop d2, as I just said earlier. White should just play c3 because that's part of his plan anyways. And then let's say black retreats with the bishop, and you've basically got the same position as if black had played bishop e7 here, except you have c3 other variation because black wasted a move playing bishop e4. So here c3 would have been better because it just attacks the bishop, gains the tempo, and it's part of white's plan anyways. But instead, bishop d2 was played, which is a good move. It just doesn't really take advantage of black's mistake. Black castles, and here c3 is no longer really so great. I mean, technically c3 could still be fine. It's just that your bishop is now kind of in the way of pushing for d4. So after something like bishop c5, you won't be able to get d4 for some time. You'd probably have to play like bishop g5 or something. So instead of c3, or perhaps maybe castling would have been best here, bishop b5 was played, which is one of those moves that has two major flaws with it. By the way, I'm not going to reveal my exact age, but I'm a teenager, as you can probably tell by my voice. Yeah, so bishop b5. Hi, Matt Chan. So bishop b5 again. This is kind of just it seems like white doesn't really have a plan here. If he did, it would be c3 and d4, and we would have seen that played right after bishop b4 check. But here, white plays bishop d2, and then he plays bishop b5, probably with the intention of, and yes, I'm a kid, yeah, I'm a teenager. bishop b5 was probably played with the intention of bishop takes c6, black recapturing, and then white winning the bishop on b4. So this would be known as like removing the defender. So let's say black plays like a6 here. Now white's idea is to take here, and then no matter which way black recaptures, to then win the bishop. But the problem with this is black's not going to be so compliant. So first of all, black can just play what he did in the game, which is just to take on d2 and trade the bishops. He can also move the bishop away, but the major flaw with bishop b5 is, besides the fact that it doesn't really have a certain plan attached to it, it's just like a one-move threat, is that it doesn't even work. So let's say black just falls straight into it and plays a6, which is a bad move. Let's say white takes. Black's not going to take back on c6 with either pawn, because as we see in this variation, white just wins the bishop. So instead, black's going to play what's known as an intermediate move, which is a move that basically got inserted into the middle of a variation. And that is, he's going to take on d2 with check. So after white recaptures in whatever way he chooses to, now if black takes the bishop back, it's just equal material. And white didn't really win it. And the point is, after bishop takes d2, white can't move his c6 bishop away because it comes with check. So that's a very interesting idea. It's just called an intermediate move. But yeah, bishop b5 didn't really come with a concrete plan, so that's something Don Rajesh could try to work on here. Next, we have bishop takes d2, so some trades of some pieces. And then a6 is played. I think this move looks kind of problematic, just because white did play bishop b5 with the intention of trading on c6. So it doesn't really look like you need to provoke white to do so, because as you see with the next move, white just goes ahead and takes anyways. So black could have spent that move playing like a more useful move like d6 or like rook e8, notably to defend e5. And so not only does black end up provoking white to actually go forward with his idea, it seems like now because white took the knight, there's no longer anything protecting e5, and Don Rajesh correctly goes ahead to snatch this pawn. So another interesting thing to note is that here taking this pawn on e5 is perfectly justified because, you know, it's just a free pawn. However, in some instances, like for instance, if we were to start with a Roy Lopez, a lot of times players don't quite understand why white doesn't just take the knight and then take on e5. So there's two reasons for this. First of all, black has concrete refutations for this move. For instance, I'm not sure which one is better, but I know there's queen g5 and there's queen d4, both of which win the pawn back in some way, shape, or form. And then afterwards, white has simply traded his good bishop for an okay knight, I guess. But the main point is black has control over the dark squares. Not like that, but rather like this. So that would be a situation where trying to grab this pawn wouldn't work, because technically, even if black didn't have anything super concrete, just like win the pawn immediately, he could always just go like bishop c5 or maybe c5, and black has a good control over the dark squares. So it's really not really worth taking that pawn. But in this game, if we just fast forward to the correct position, here, not only does black not have any concrete way of basically gaining compensation for the loss of the pawn, but he also doesn't have a dark squared bishop or any superior dark squared control at all. So here black tries to gain some compensation and plays rook e8. So this is good. Nothing really wrong with that. I guess maybe I think black has the right idea here, which is he needs to kind of strike back somehow So rook e8 is a good idea. He should also have like d5 striking the center in mind, as well as some other ideas. But rook e8 was good. So white retreats the knight, which is good. And then here d6, again, now black's just kind of playing like a normal position, but he's down a pawn. So that's not really ideal. So I guess instead of d6, I would go for d5 here, just because that's actually threatening to do something like this. So let's just verify with the computer. And as you can see, the computer's top choice is d5. So I didn't really come up with that move by calculating anything. It's just like principally you're kind of down material. Your king's still in the, your opponent's king is still in the middle. In one move, he's just gonna castle, so you want to like strike back. So d6 is just too slow, so now white's just up a nice healthy pawn. He castles, gets his king out of the center. Bishop g4, c3. Alright, I mean c3 is okay here, but I'm not really sure you're gonna get d4. And even if you do, it doesn't have the same like central influence as it did when it was attacking e5. But it's a good move. Knight h5 comes, which is kind of a weird move, honestly. I guess black's trying to go knight f4, which is a good idea. It's not very standard, I guess, here. The point of knight f4 is to exploit that weak square and to try to create some threats. But here, Don just plays well. He plays h3. So generally, when you're up material, trading pieces is a good idea. This is not a concrete rule or anything. In fact, it's actually a guideline that has been followed incorrectly many times, especially in endgames where players trade better pieces because they thought that was the way to go. But here, black's bishop is kind of annoying, and playing h3 and trading a knight for the bishop just leads into an equal, like minor piece endgame, except you're up a pawn. So here black kind of just like throws in a desperado, I guess, with bishop takes h3. So this is obviously not very justified. It was just kind of like black being desperate, I guess. So I guess instead black should just trade here or just retreat with the bishop. But instead he takes on h3, which is just lost, I guess. Knight f4 does come. So he is going to win one back. It's just not very strong. So knight h2 is played, which would not have been my first choice. I'm just going to check with the computer, but I was thinking like king h2 here. Yeah, that's actually the first choice. So the idea behind king h2 is you are protecting h3. And also, if black's queen ever tries to penetrate on the g file and tries to mate you on g2, which is kind of typical when you've got a knight on f4, now we always have rook g1 to just stop that. So here, I guess black can only really take, but then after something simple like queen c2, white's just up a piece. So that h2 isn't bad, it's just not the most accurate. Excuse me. Queen g5 comes, which is definitely the most active move. Queen g4, so this was Don Rajesh's idea, I guess. Just to block the queen check. Knight e2, king h1. And seems like he kind of blundered his d2 knight, but it shouldn't be a big deal because let me just check. But I think if you go like rook f, sorry, not like that, like rook f e1, knight f4, and then sorry, rook e1, knight f4, And then here, attacking the queen takes rook f1. That should win the piece back, but I'm just going to check with the engine. So rook a e1 is the move suggested. And let's just see what's wrong with knight f4. So the move is knight f3. Okay, that makes sense. So you're just removing the defender, the queen has to move, and you get the knight back. But like I said before, this idea of knight h2 just wasn't the most accurate, I guess. So queen g4, here, rook f e1 comes, and then black just graciously doesn't even try to like save the knight. So white won it back, queen takes, and he took with the queen, which is good because white's up a piece, so he's not really afraid of trading queens here. Queen takes, rook g6, rook g1 again, white is just trying to trade pieces here because he's up a full knight, so if all of the rooks were to be traded, he would just be able to use this knight to win, basically. So a few more moves. Rook e3 is actually just a simple blunder of the f2 pawn, but basically the game's kind of over at this point. His opponent doesn't spot it. Rook e g3, so that was a nice idea, just needed some better execution, but this is a rook lift to the g file to attack the g7 pawn, g6, knight g4, and then his opponent just needs to like move the rook or something, but he missed that knight g4, not only protects the pawn, but it also attacks the rook, and after h5, white just took the rook, which actually, adding insult to injury, also forks the king and the rook, so sucks for black, and it turns out he just resigned here. So overall, that was a nice game, by the way. I don't think he played particularly well. It's just that he played solidly when his opponent made mistakes, but overall in the opening, he didn't really have a clear plan. So just know that in the Italian game, for white at least, one of the main plans is simply to go c3, d4, and control the bishop b4, that just walks straight into that idea, so you just want to go c3, and then prepare for d4. So that's just the main point in this game. Always have an idea or a plan behind your moves. Alright, so I guess we can move on to the next game. Unless anyone wants to request a certain game to look at, I'm just going to take a look at the next one in the list then. So the next one in the list is actually my game against Matt Chan in the U.S. Amateur Team East tournament. So we drew in this game, but it was definitely full of a lot of complicated ideas. So I haven't really looked at this ahead of time, but hopefully we can still pick up some interesting things from this game. So I'll just give it a second to load here. Alright, so this game was actually also in Italian. It's actually just being a bit slow right now, but so it started the same way with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. But here my opponent chose a different variation, which is slightly less popular, but still very sound and very good. And here I kind of just didn't want to go into like a typical variation that I know, which is kind of going d3 and going like knight c3 and like fighting for the d5 square. So I played something kind of like, I wouldn't say like abnormal, but a little different, I guess. So I'm still going for the same d4 idea. It just turns out that in this opening, it's just like a slightly more inferior idea compared to some other variations, like if black played bishop c5 here instead of bishop e7. So knight f6 was played d3, and basically white's plan here is to kind of just build up with his pieces, castle, put the rook on the e file, and then slowly aim for d4. It's not really like a 1-2 punch or anything like that. So castles is played, and here I played a4, just because if I were to castle, I was afraid of something like knight a5. I don't know if this is actually extremely good or anything, but here we would kind of, in order to preserve my better bishop, something like this might happen. And all of a sudden we've gotten more of like a Roy Lopez type position, which I'm not very familiar with and haven't really played this before, so I kind of wanted to avoid that. So I just played a4. The idea is if knight a5 now, just bishop a2, tucking the bishop away. So here my opponent plays what I believe is the best move in the position, d5. So instead of playing something passive like d6, black aims to strike back in the center to try to gain some central control. And after e takes, knight takes, here I just castle. And here I felt like both sides kind of went wrong. So my opponent went knight b6, which is the right idea. I just felt like execution might have been off in some sense, because black kind of wants to go bishop g4 and then knight b6, and many times the d3 pawn gets weak. So, and white, as we saw before, does not want to trade this bishop. So after like knight b6, I played bishop b5, because this way I'm still kind of defending the d3 pawn, because if I play something like bishop b3, for example, there are ideas of bishop f5. Like, I don't know if this is good in this exact position, but it would kind of force d4, in which I would get an isolated queen pawn, so that's not really ideal. So instead we had bishop b5, and here, bishop g4, I thought that was good, I guess. The computer suggests a5, which makes no sense to me, like whatsoever. Because I can just take here, or I could just leave my bishop alone. So during the game, I was kind of unsure about what to do if a6 happened, because now I basically have to take c6. And after this trade, I had once lost a game that was very similar to this, in which, like, yes, white's up a pawn, but light squared bishop can, like, really dominate the position. So I was kind of worried, like, maybe my opponent would go for, like, queen d5, and then maybe, like, c5 and bishop e7, or something like that, just playing on the light squares. But bishop g4 was played, which is definitely a good move. And here I played h3, which once again I wasn't so I'm not really so sure that was the best. Maybe I should have gone a5, because then after the knight's kicked, if black ever wants a6, I can hide here. I think h3 was fine, but the computer says a5 is best. So let's just double check that. So instead of h3, so the computer says a5. So I guess it's just because of the idea I just mentioned. It just saves my bishop from being forced to trade, I guess. So like knight d5, not knight takes a5. I'm gonna delete that move. So, oh, what happened? Just lost my spot. So a5. So like a5, then like knight d5. Huh. Seems like chess.com's being a bit buggy right now. Okay, now, no, not that. Okay, I'm actually gonna refresh the page. It's being a little buggy because I can't select the right variation. But basically the idea is a5 would have kind of saved the light squared bishop, so I guess that was more accurate, and after black moves the knight, I can always go like h3 afterwards. So yeah, I guess that might have been better, but in the game I just played h3, which we'll see once this page finishes reloading. So Alright, so like let's say a5, knight d5 maybe. And oh, so actually the computer's suggesting a6. So this is a nice idea. It's taking advantage of the fact that this knight's only protected by the pawn, so by playing a6, we're kind of ruining black's pawn structure. So that actually would have been pretty nice if I'd played that, but I played h3. My opponent took, I took. And then yeah, queen d6 was, the computer says it's a blunder. I don't think it's that bad, but definitely wasn't right. I think, so the computer says knight a5. That doesn't seem right to me either. But I was thinking queen d5 or a6 during the game. The point is, like, a6, white's not actually going to win a pawn on c6 because d3 would be hanging. So I thought a6 might have been better. Let's just take a look at what the computer's suggesting with knight a5. So I guess the idea is knight b3 is always possible. So although the knight's kind of in this weird position, it can kind of trade itself off. And black's probably going to play c6 to consolidate against this diagonal, and then play knight b3, trade for this bishop, and then, yeah. So the computer suggests knight d2, which is logical. But yeah, then something like a6 or c6, I think. It actually says bishop g5, which is very interesting, because this is kind of like a fight for piece imbalances, because black would love to trade this horrible knight for this bishop, but the knight is protecting the b3 square. So black wants to take here, and then trade for the bishop. So by trading those two pieces, yes, he's given up his decent bishop for white's decent knight, but then he got rid of his horrible knight for white's good bishop. So that's interesting. Bishop g5 is a nice idea. But yeah, queen d6 unfortunately is just not the best, because now I finally find the right idea, which is a5. And now there's no more a6 or knight a5 or any of that. So knight d5 is played. I played knight d2, which is a very natural move. I don't know if there was anything better here. Let's just take a look. Okay, so knight d2 is basically either one of, it's one of the top moves, so we'll just say that's good. Knight d2, a6 is played. And apparently knight e4 wasn't good. So I played knight e4, basically just developing my piece with tempo, and then I'm going to like retreat with my bishop or play bishop c4 or something like that. But seems like the computer is suggesting knight c4. Knight c4. I'm not actually sure why this is better, but let's just say like queen e6. So it's, the computer's suggesting either bishop a4 or bishop takes c6. It actually says bishop a4 is better, but I guess the point of knight c4 is we're also, pressuring e5. So like bishop a4, just maintaining pressure on that knight. Rook e1, maybe bishop d2, and then just apply more pressure. That's interesting. So, as you can see when I'm analyzing with an engine, I'm not actually just like saying like, oh, knight c4 was better because it looked better. I'm just actually trying to draw some general conclusions that I can use. So it just seems like knight c4 was applying more pressure on my opponent's somewhat weak e5 pawn. So I guess that's why knight e4 was less accurate, just because it didn't come with that threat. So knight e4, queen d7, bishop c4, knight f6. I think these were all the best moves. So here I went knight g3, which the computer doesn't dislike that much, but in the game I just didn't really want to trade my knight because I thought it was just like a better piece, so than his knight, that is. So I didn't really want to trade. So I just played knight g3. Computer also says like rook d1. The idea would be if you take, now you take with the d pawn and you open up the d file, but I think that's kind of like bogus, honestly. Because black's not compelled to take either. It's just generally it would be slightly better for black, like the trade of knights. So I thought knight f6 was fine, yeah. So knight g3, rook a d8 was the second move, so I think that's good. The computer's suggesting knight e8, so that's actually an idea I've seen before. So the idea is just knight d6. Oh, not like that. Knight d6, and you're just trying to control more of the center. But I don't really think that's necessary here. Rook a d8, knight f5, this is all good. And now my opponent plays knight e8, which is good. Here I play queen g4 just to try to make something happen. Although it's like a rather equal position, I would say. The computer is suggesting bishop e3, but again, like what if just knight d6? Seems like after the trade, black's just fine. I mean, he's slightly worse, but he was slightly worse throughout this whole game, I guess. So the computer wants to launch like a queenside attack, like a minority attack to kind of weaken up the position. So that actually does make some sense. The point is, if you end up opening this up, you have an A pawn that could either try to destroy black's pawn structure, or if like we trade like this and the B pawn comes off of the B file, then you've got a passed pawn. So I guess that does make some sense. But I think queen g4 practically just makes more sense, and they do have similar computer evaluations. g6 is played. Apparently that's an inaccuracy. Let's just see why. g6, and the computer suggests trading. I think, sorry, it would be knight takes and then knight takes on e7. So that actually is what I played. And now what? So I played queen e4. But the computer's suggesting something quite interesting here, which is bishop h6. So I never really considered trading the queen, so I don't really look at any other piece to move except for my queen. Let's try to figure out why the computer thinks this is good. So if black does take, which probably isn't good, because that just brings a pawn in to defend the important f5 score for black's knight. But let's just say it does happen. Knight g7 is played. So here the point is, I guess, white's just got the bishop pair and black has a lot of weaknesses. So I guess rook fe1, knight c6. And again, this b4 idea came up again. So that's very interesting. I've never really thought about pushing on the queen side when in general white goes for the center here. But yeah, white's just trying to create some more weaknesses again, because currently this is like the only main target. I mean, black's got some like weak dark squares, but it's not like a big problem because the queens aren't on the board. So yeah, b4 does make quite a lot of sense actually. So bishop h6 would have been nice, I guess. e4 I thought was fine though. The only problem is now, even though I end up winning a pawn, my opponent is able to trade off my light squared bishop, which was very powerful. So here I guess I might have been too material like oriented, I guess, and just I kind of underestimated the importance of my c4 bishop. Because overall in the game, I maintained that one pawn advantage for basically the entire game, but it didn't really help me because I mean after all they are doubled c pawns. So knight c6, queen g3, just keeping my queen on this diagonal to pressure c7. Knight e7, which was a very annoying and a good move. Just because knight f5 comes and it's just activating his piece and making it better. Here bishop g5 is played. The computer says rook e1 is best, but honestly I don't really see a big difference there. So knight actually f6, bishop f4, knight f5, queen f3, and here my opponent plays what initially I thought was like honestly pretty horrible. My opponent played c6 here. So usually what you do is to combat a bishop, you put your pawns on that bishop's color in order to kind of blockade it. But here my opponent basically went for a different strategy, like a more passive one, which is to instead put all of his pawns on light squares. And the point is, since I have a dark squared bishop, I can't attack those pawns with my bishop. So they're not really weaknesses, and the weak dark squares around them don't really matter too much. Unless we have all the pieces traded off and I get my king marching in, it's not actually a big deal. So here my opponent kind of just played c6 and kind of just asked me like, alright, like prove your advantage because you have this extra c pawn, but it's blockaded pretty much. So rook a d1, and we have some pretty normal moves, queen f7, b3, rook f e8, and then here it seems pretty inevitable that one pair of rooks is going to end up being traded. So I just played rook f e1, basically just asking my opponent to decide which file he wants to trade on. He took on the e file. I'm honestly not sure if there's a major difference because he ends up going rook e8 to trade anyways. So the computer says this is once again bad and suggests h5, which is honestly that's not a human move. That doesn't make any sense. So if your opponent ever plays a move like h5 in this position, I mean, I guess it has some sense, but like, it really doesn't, because you're just weakening g6 after h5. And like, what's the point? You don't have to control the g4 square or something. So rook e8 I thought was best. Rook d1, because as you can see, if the major pieces are traded off, my bishop doesn't have anything to attack, and frankly, black's the only one that can actually make progress. As long as black's king just controls good squares or something, I can't really improve my position. So I need to keep at least the queens on the board and hopefully one pair of rooks, because the queen by itself can't coordinate that well. But a queen and a rook, you can kind of try to infiltrate the position. So that was my thought process. Queen d3, so I've only got one open file under my control, so I might as well reinforce that, put my queen on the d file. Here king f7 was played, and my opponent definitely outplayed me in this stage of the game because I never would have thought of king f7, but My opponent understood that really his king's not in like severe danger or anything like that. So he's just preparing for if there's a queen trade, his king's closer to the center, and if I ever check, he now has rook e7 to protect 7th rank. So I played g4, not because I thought it was good. Frankly, it just weakens my king, but I mean, I guess it creates some practical chances because black could technically mess up somehow. Knight g7 was played. I tucked my bishop away with bishop g3. The main point is if I play something like, let's say king h2 here, I was afraid of queen e4. And then we have to trade queens, and that's just not a very winnable endgame for white. So instead, I just tucked my bishop away. Queen e2 is played, which was a good move. And here I played queen d6, which is a complete blunder according to the computer. I played it again just because, not because it's like objectively the best, but because in an actual game it creates some chances. There was a lot of calculation involved, so I remember I spent quite a lot of time on this move. Let's see what other moves I could have played. So, the computer suggests queen takes e2, which is something I would never play, so yeah, all three of the top computer suggestions are allowing a queen trade of some sort. But let's just see what's actually wrong with queen d6, because it doesn't look like such a bad move to me. It says knight e6. I guess the main point is queen d6 is trying to gain some activity, but in reality there is none to be gained in this position. So I guess that's the conclusion I'm going to draw from this computer evaluation. Rook e6 is played, which apparently is a mistake. Why, though? So it's apparently a mistake because white can try to offer a queen trade. So I think I've seen this enough times that I need to reinvestigate this endgame. So my first impression of trading queens is just it's horrible because the endgame's not good for me. But I mean, I guess I still am up a pawn, so bishop c7, like I don't understand this because white's bishop can't do anything there. f5. Yeah, I honestly don't really know what. I don't really know why this endgame is supposedly good for white. Hi Marco Batman, welcome to the stream. We're just taking a look at a game I played against Matt Chan at a tournament recently, an online one. But apparently this endgame is supposed to be like winning almost for white, but I guess like where's the win? White just sacked a pawn. Actually, it's not a sack because black can't take that. Rook d7 would come, and that would be catastrophic for black. But still, I'm going to stick to my opinion that that endgame's not very winnable for white. So I played queen d6, trying to create something. Rook e6, it's like a slight inaccuracy. Knight e6 would have been better, but basically the same thing. And here I like overestimated my chances, and I played rook d6 trying to create something. But I think it just doesn't work because my opponent found something that I just completely missed. So after some checks, king h2, knight e6, and here after knight e6 I was very happy. I thought queen h8 would win on the spot. Unfortunately, queen h8 and my opponent has this very nice defensive resource g5. So now it's not looking so great for me. I played c5 just because, well, first of all, black can't really take that because that might infiltrate the position, I think. Or actually, f6, which is behaving. And second, just because I don't really have anything else to play here. So queen g6 was played, and I just completely missed his idea, which is, I think queen g8 is like an idea to trade queens. So I played queen c8 because I still have the mentality that I want to create some practical chances, and I don't want to trade queens. However, both players did not properly understand that. Apparently, the endgame is white's best shot here. So queen g8, and I end up trading anyways. So now, after b4, which is probably the best move, king f7. Can't really remember what happened here, but I know I overpressed somehow. So the computer still says white's better, but just understand that this is basically equal, or and white's not gonna really win this. The computer just sees an extra pawn and kind of like the evaluation kind of spikes here, but overall it's not really like a big advantage for white at all. So king f3, that's an inaccuracy apparently, and my opponent plays f5, which I thought during the game was very good. The computer says mistake, which, I mean, I guess it loses control of the e5 square, but like f5 and h5 are both coming eventually, I think. So I don't really think it matters if black starts with h5 and then goes f5 or the other way around. But f5, bishop e5, so I play that because otherwise f4 comes and shuts down my bishop. And I also don't want to trade my g4 pawn because that's holding black's king like backwards. It's stopping black from making progress here. So h5 comes. I played c4 because I didn't really have anything else to do. And my opponent creates a passed h-pawn. So here's where it kind of started to go wrong, I think. So I played king e4. The computer still says I'm better, but now black has a passed h-pawn, so I don't even think white can win this, but I was still trying. h3 is played. I feel like that might have been a bit premature. Like, I get that the idea is now if like white screws up and like plays like bishop c3, well, now you're gonna promote. But I think just to leave the pawn connected to g5 and just to have this pawn chain would have been better, because after h3 it's just like hypothetically it could get weak, I guess, but it's not really a big deal. As you can see, black can generate enough counterplay to force white to kind of attend to the pawn and also force him to, and also like stop him from just simply taking it. So here we did some shuffling. I thought I could kind of like put black in zigzag, but that was just a fantasy in my own head. And the rest of the game just got worse for me, I think. Now I don't even think I have an advantage. As you can see, the computer has significantly lowered the evaluation. Rook d2, as soon as I got passive, this was basically completely drawn, like no chances for white. So the game concluded like knight f4. I gave a check. Went right back. I think that was just to see if my opponent would try to like switch it up or anything, but he just goes straight back. Rook d6, king g7, and here I play b5. I have no clue if that's good or not, but it's the only way I can win, so I went for it. So it turns out it's like an okay move, I guess. But it's like an important pawn break, because otherwise I can't ever make use of my extra c pawn, because if I can't push those pawns, then it doesn't really matter if there's 1 or 2 on the c file. So now rook f6. Trading's not good for me. So first I took on c6, and then I went rook d8 with the hopes that I could, win a6 and then push and then win the game, but as my opponent very accurately shows, knight e6 just stops all this. And now it's actually black who's in the driver's seat. So this is a classic example of over pushing an equal position. So I'm not going to go through the rest of the game in detail because it was a time scramble and definitely not the most accurate thing in the world. But yeah, eventually my opponent should have won or at least continued to push, but we ended up agreeing to a draw, I think. Let's just see how the game ended. So king d4. So black gets a5. I get a6, knight b7, and the knight heads back to c5, which is very annoying because if this pawn was not there or something, and let's just say it was on h7 and it wasn't a passed pawn, and let's say my bishop was on e3, then yes, white's still better. But now that black can just infiltrate the position like this and control white, this was just not good. So there's a lot of moving back and forth here because, like I said before, we were very low on time, so. And let's just see. This was all good, but like black's pieces are just more active here. And here I think I try to activate my rook the wrong way. I should have just brought it to h1, move it to c1, protect c4, and then just draw. But I'm like throughout this whole game I was just very like aggressively oriented, I guess, is a way you could put it. So there's a lot of indecisive moves here, moving my rook up and down the h-file, but in the end, let's see. Rook h1 came. This was a blunder, I think, because rook a3 came, which apparently wasn't accurate enough for the computer, which doesn't make much sense to me because I think it just wins a pawn. It just wins c4. So the computer suggests knight e4. I guess the idea is now rook a3 comes with the threat of knight takes g3 as well. So yeah, I guess that's a little stronger, but it's fully understandable why my opponent went for rook a3. He won the c4 pawn, but since it was just a time scramble, we ended up just drawing basically. And yeah, so I felt like in this end position, black could have pushed a little more, but that's not really the point of the game. So yeah, actually, rook d2 might have just won. But yeah, overall it was kind of like a back and forth game towards the end, but in the beginning there were a lot of interesting ideas that I learned from this game, at least. So the first is I needed to play a5 because not only does this prevent black from forcing a trade of this bishop, but also because after something like knight d5, I'm able to play a6, which is able to weaken black's pawn structure on the queen side. So that would have been nice. And then another thing is, throughout the whole game, I didn't want to trade queens, but it turns out that in many of the positions or scenarios, trading queens would have been fine. And then I think the final thing to learn from this game probably would have been that if, for instance, we trade queens, there's this idea of a queenside minority attack. And basically, the point is I'm going to try to weaken the queenside pawn structure. So that's a recurring theme in this game, I guess. Alright, so that was a long game. I think I analyzed that for over 30 minutes, actually. But now I guess, with the remaining time, chat, let me know if you want me to take a look at another game, maybe like a short one, or if you want, I can just spend the remaining time and just play you guys in live chess. So just let me know. Hi Brian, no problem. Thanks for joining the stream. So do you guys want me to analyze one more short game, or do you guys want to challenge me in live chess? Completely up to you guys. Sure, we can analyze another game. Don Rajesh, I don't know if you came in the beginning of the stream or not, but we did take a look at a game that you won quite easily, actually. I could just do a really quick recap of that before moving on to the last game. So in this game, Don Rajesh, while it's loading, the main idea, I guess, was that it didn't really seem like you had a plan there. You were kind of playing like one move threats, I guess, which can work. But generally, it's best if you have moves that kind of connect with each other and all try to aim for a typical plan. So in the Italian game, one of the most notable plans is simply to play c3 and then eventually d4 to strike in the center. So after like d3 here, your idea is you want to play c3 and then not d4 immediately because that would be premature, e4 would be hanging and a lot of problems would arise, but rather like c3, castle, like maybe knight d2, rook e1, maybe you want to maneuver your knight here to better protect while not blocking the d file or something, and then eventually you play d4. So the main point is after your opponent played bishop b4, which was not a good move by any means, like bishop c5 would have been fine, bishop e7 would have been fine, but this just runs straight into c3 because that's just part of this typical plan in this position. So if you play that, not only do you gain a tempo on the bishop, but you also just end up playing a move that helps improve your plan, I guess. So that would have been better. And then that would also apply to bishop b5. Like, your idea is you want c3. Maybe it's not as good since you've already played bishop d2, but bishop b5 is not really the way you want to, like the direction you want to take here, because you're trying to control the center overall. And this is kind of like a Roy Lopez, where both sides have kind of wasted like a useful move and played it like doing something else. So white has gone bishop c4 and then bishop b5, and black has like kind of gone like this or something. I don't know, but it's kind of like a weird position. But after trading, your opponent just started to crumble, and the rest of the game you played very solidly. So I won't go into that again. Okay, so with the remaining time, let's just take a look at one final game. Is there anyone that would like to request a game? Otherwise, I'm just going to choose a game that doesn't have a lot of moves, I guess. Maybe this one or this one? Let's see what's on page 2. A lot of games from Chess with Nikolai. I guess I'll just choose one from him. Maybe this one. It was a quick draw, so maybe there's something interesting there. So let's analyze this game. 17 move draw. That's just like a slightly longer Grandmaster draw, huh? I mean, guess we could take a look, so. Alright. Looks like we've got yet another game that started off e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. But this time, it's no longer an Italian game with bishop c4, but rather a Roy Lopez, also sometimes called the Spanish opening or something like that, but it's just a Roy Lopez. So here, like I said before, after a6, white's not actually trying to win a pawn. He's just kind of trying to apply more pressure, because if white takes, not only are there concrete refutations like queen g5 and queen d4, which both double attack something, like this, but also because white's dark squares are kind of weak. So white correctly goes bishop a4, and it's important to note that Chess with Nikolai submitted this, and he's black, so he's playing a very, very strong opponent, comparatively strong opponent at least, who I guess didn't play that well because he drew, but bishop a4 is correct, b5, bishop b3, knight f6, this is all very common and all that. Castles, knight takes e4, I mean, the computer says inaccuracy, but I'm pretty sure this is just an opening variation. d4, I feel like this is an opening variation. So I'm gonna kind of ignore the computer suggestions here because I think they're just wrong. d5 got played. I guess that's okay. It does kind of give the pawn back. His opponent took. Knight takes, d takes. Okay, bishop e7. I mean, my first impression of bishop e7 was that the bishop doesn't belong there and that it's kind of blocked in. But I guess it's not a big deal. I think it should still be fine. Intuitively, I think bishop e6, and that's also what the computer is kind of suggesting here. But it's not really the biggest problem or anything. c3 is played, bishop c5, and yeah, overall white misplayed this because black definitely gave him some chances. I guess it started with d4 on move 7. The computer suggested rook e1, which I guess is just better. I think it's safe to assume that. So bishop c5 is played here, knight d2. Pieces were traded, which is okay, I guess. Castles. Queen e2. d4. Alright, d4 is a very good move. Actually, the computer completely disagrees with me. Let's see. So the computer says queen h4, so it doesn't really matter what you do here, I guess. It's just the problem with d4 is it seems like there may be a concrete refutation or something. It was saying, the computer was saying e6 before. Now it's saying queen h5 with the idea of e6. E6 coming with like a discovered attack. But I guess since white takes, then black's fine. Bishop takes d4. e6. F takes e6. Queen takes. And this is apparently like a blunder. I guess we'll see why soon. King h8, rook a d1, queen f6. Yeah, no, don't trade queens here. I'm gonna try to figure out what's the move. So the computer says rook f6 is very strong. And the idea would be rook g6 coming with a rook lift, and white can never block this strong bishop, which black correctly opened up with d4 because of this pin. So yeah, that's actually very strong and just basically winning on the spot. But our, I guess our hero in the story went for queen f6, which I guess makes some sense because he's trying to trade pieces against a higher rated opponent. And here they apparently just agreed to a draw. But yeah, no, rook f6 would have been very, very, like, winning, I guess. So overall, d4 was definitely good then. As long as there isn't a concrete refutation to d4, then it should be good. Because, at least principally, because before your bishop's just kind of blocked in, which is why I didn't want to put it there in the first place, which is why bishop e6 is a bit more standard. But once you're able to open it, that piece is a monster. I mean, just look at it. It's just like, it's eyeing like every single like, board on that diagonal. I mean, score on that diagonal. So yeah, d4 was good. And that's basically the main takeaway. I mean, I don't know much theory about the Roy Lopez, but it seemed like black was kind of inaccurate in the opening, but white didn't do anything to take advantage of that, so, yeah, black found a nice idea, d4, and then white screwed up by allowing a lot of counterplay, and because black came in as basically the underdog in this game, he kind of wanted to just trade queens, and because of that, white correctly accepts or offers a draw here because he's just slightly worse. So yeah, overall that was a nice game, I guess. If does anyone have any other questions? Otherwise, I think that would basically wrap it up for today. Alright, well, thanks everyone for joining the stream. I think that'll be it for today. I think our next stream will be a viewer arena. Just make sure to stay tuned and look for any updates in my official club, which you can find like on my profile page or anything like that. Alright, so thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye!